The chamber was already tense when Stephen Miller leaned forward, his eyes flashing with impatience. With a sharp crack, his hands slammed against the table, the sound ricocheting through the room like a gavel of contempt. Jasmine Crockett had barely begun her point when his voice cut across hers, loud, forceful, dripping with the arrogance of someone who had no intention of listening. The audience gasped. Some shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Others whispered in disbelief. It wasn't the first time that day Miller had chosen interruption over dialogue, but this one carried the weight of open dismissal, as if her words didn't matter, as if she didn't matter. Crockett paused, steadying herself, her eyes fixed on him with the composure of someone who had endured far worse battles outside the glare of cameras. Her lips tightened, but she didn't flinch. Instead, she allowed the silence to hang, a silence that reminded everyone in the room just how calculated his disrespect truly was. And then, again, his voice rose, steamrolling over hers a second time, then a third. Each interruption grew sharper, more aggressive, more desperate to dominate. It wasn't debate anymore. It was an attempt to erase her presence altogether. The cameras zoomed in, capturing every twitch of his jaw, every flicker of her resolve. By the fourth time, the murmurs turned into outright murmurs of disapproval. By the fifth, an audible groan rippled through the gallery. And by the sixth, the room itself seemed to teeter on the edge of eruption. Miller leaned back, smirking with the confidence of a man convinced he had seized control. But in that very moment, Crockett's calm, unbroken gaze suggested otherwise. She hadn't raised her voice, hadn't lost her footing, hadn't surrendered the dignity he was so eager to strip away. The narrator's voice cuts in, slow and deliberate. He interrupted her 6 times, but he never expected what would happen on the 7th. The air thickened. Every camera lens, every microphone, every beating heart in that chamber now waited for her response. Would she finally break under his barrage, or would she deliver the line that no one, least of all Stephen Miller, saw coming? The answer was seconds away, and it would leave the entire room breathless. The confrontation unfolding in that chamber wasn't just about 2 people sparring over policy. It was about something deeper, something far more consequential. The debate that day centered on immigration and the meaning of belonging in America. Who is seen, who is heard, and who is dismissed. For Stephen Miller, it was familiar territory. He had long built his career on sharp words, exclusionary rhetoric, and policies that drew hard lines between who deserved dignity and who didn't. So when Miller interrupted Jasmine Crockett again and again, it wasn't only an attack on her personally. It was symbolic. It was the echo of centuries in which certain voices, especially those of women, of immigrants, of people of color, were cut short, pushed aside, or erased altogether. Each time his words collided with hers, the insult carried a weight beyond the room. He wasn't simply debating immigration. He was reenacting the very silencing that millions had endured before. Crockett knew it. The audience watching from home felt it. And even those sitting in the chamber, caught between discomfort and disbelief, understood instinctively what was at stake. Her voice was more than her own. It was the voice of families who had sacrificed everything for a chance at the American dream. It was the echo of workers who built this country brick by brick, yet were told they would never belong. It was the hope of children growing up between 2 worlds, searching for a future where they could finally feel whole. To silence her was to silence them all. The interruptions multiplied like hammer blows, and with each one the air in the room grew heavier. Miller wasn't just being rude. He was trying to assert dominance, to establish that his narrative, his power, his privilege could drown out hers. Yet in that very effort, he revealed what he feared most, the truth she carried with her. The narrator's voice pierced through the tension. If he silenced her voice, it would silence millions who share her struggle. Every viewer at home could feel it. This wasn't only Jasmine's battle, it was their own. The father who had crossed oceans to give his children a chance. The mother who worked double shifts, unseen and unthanked. The young student dreaming of a better tomorrow. Each of them watched, waiting, hoping she would not be drowned out. And in that moment, Jasmine Crockett made a choice. She would not let her words be erased. She would not surrender the dignity of those who counted on her. Miller might have interrupted her 6 times, but each attempt at silencing only sharpened the power of what was to come. The room leaned forward, every eye fixed on her, every ear straining to hear the words he could not bury. But Jasmine had other plans. Long before he ever leaned across that chamber table, Stephen Miller had built a reputation that preceded him. To some, he was a policy architect. To many more, he was the face of exclusion, the strategist whose fingerprints were found on some of the harshest immigration measures in modern American history. From the travel ban that left families stranded at airports to the policy of separating children from their parents at the border, Miller's legacy was one of walls, bans, and division. He reveled in the role of the enforcer, the man unafraid to wield cold bureaucracy like a weapon. His public style mirrored his policies, unyielding, confrontational, dripping with disdain for those who dared challenge him. In televised debates, he rarely answered questions directly. Instead, he talked over moderators, ridiculed opponents, and doubled down on rhetoric meant to provoke outrage rather than foster dialogue. To him, debate was not about truth-seeking, it was about dominance. Whoever shouted loudest won, and Miller had made a career of being the loudest voice in the room. This pattern wasn't accidental. It was deliberate. Time and again, Miller bulldozed his way through conversations, reducing complex human struggles to talking points. His tone carried the entitlement of someone convinced that empathy was weakness, that compassion was a liability. He wasn't interested in listening because listening would mean recognizing humanity in those he sought to vilify. Better, in his view, to mock, to interrupt, to steamroll, to silence. Even those who once worked alongside him described a man unmoved by tears, by suffering, by stories of families torn apart. To Miller, emotion was irrelevant. Numbers, walls, and bans were his language. His adversaries often walked away exasperated, unable to penetrate the shield of arrogance he wore like armor. He believed that armor made him untouchable. And yet, beneath the theatrics of his style was a fragility he could not hide. Each interruption, each insult, each smirk was not just arrogance. It was insecurity. The louder he spoke, the clearer it became that he feared the quiet power of a steady voice. For nothing unsettles a bully more than someone who refuses to play by his rules. In that chamber, as he cut Jasmine Crockett off again and again, Miller was not simply repeating old habits. He was acting out the only playbook he had ever known: overwhelm, dominate, dismiss. It had worked before. It had silenced others. It had even won him influence in the highest halls of power. But arrogance carries within it the seed of its own downfall. Every empire built on silencing others eventually collapses when confronted with a truth too strong to bury. And on that day, Stephen Miller was about to face such a truth. His interruptions may have rattled the room, but the composure in Crockett's eyes told another story, a story he was not prepared for. For all his years of bulldozing, for all his attempts to erase, he had never come up against someone whose very presence embodied resilience, dignity, and unshakable resolve. The narrator's voice cuts through, calm yet foreboding. But arrogance always meets its match. The stage was set. His downfall was not coming through louder words or sharper interruptions. It was coming through something far more powerful, the strength of a voice that refused to be silenced. Before the cameras, before the lights, before the chamber where her voice would shake the arrogance of Stephen Miller, Jasmine Crockett was a daughter shaped by struggle and by love. She grew up watching her family weather storms that would have broken others. Her father, a man of discipline and quiet pride, carried the lessons of service and sacrifice deep in his bones. Her mother, unwavering and determined, taught her that strength is not always loud. Sometimes it is found in patience, in endurance, in the choice to rise every single morning and keep going when the world tries to hold you down. Those lessons became the foundation of her character. As a child, Jasmine saw how society often overlooked families like hers, hardworking, principled, yet constantly underestimated. She learned early what it meant to be silenced, to be spoken over, to be told her voice didn't carry weight. And she promised herself she would never let that silence become permanent. In school, she discovered the power of words, not the kind that shout or belittle, but the kind that illuminate. She found that a steady argument, backed by conviction and delivered with clarity, could shift entire rooms. Teachers recognized in her not only intelligence, but an ability to speak for others who could not. That gift would become her weapon, sharpened over years of practice and countless trials. Her path was not easy. As she pursued education and later law, she encountered doors that slammed in her face, voices that told her she wasn't qualified, and systems designed to make her quit. But every setback forged resilience. Every rejection reminded her of the people she was fighting for, the families like her own who worked tirelessly yet were denied the dignity they deserved. When she entered public service, she carried with her those same voices. She did not see herself as standing apart from them. She saw herself as one of them. Her speeches were never just policy. They were lived experience, woven into a tapestry of justice and belonging. People heard themselves in her words, felt their own struggles reflected in her battles. And slowly, her presence became something larger than one person. It became a movement. Yet even as her profile grew, Jasmine never lost the calm strength that defined her. Where others might explode in anger, she leaned on composure. She understood that dignity disarms arrogance. That silence, held just long enough, can speak louder than shouting. Her poise was not weakness. It was power, the kind that left adversaries stumbling, unsure of how to break her resolve. Her father's lessons echoed in her every choice. Serve with honor, speak with courage, and never let them take your humanity. When Miller interrupted her, she wasn't only standing in that chamber for herself. She was standing for every immigrant family dismissed as less American, every woman spoken over in boardrooms and courtrooms, every young voice told to wait their turn. She knew that when she spoke, she carried them all with her. And in carrying them, she carried something Miller could never understand: truth. Not the manufactured sound bites of political theater, but truth born of lived experience, of sacrifice, of generations who had endured. That truth would be her weapon, sharper than any insult, stronger than any interruption. So as Miller leaned back with his smug grin, convinced he had silenced her, Jasmine's calm eyes told a different story. She had been silenced before. She had been underestimated before. But every time, she had risen. And this time, she would rise again, not just for herself, but for millions watching. The narrator's voice lingers, building suspense. She had grown up in a world that tried to silence her. But silence had only taught her how to make her words impossible to ignore. And now, in this chamber, her journey had led her to the moment where those words would matter most. The first interruption came swiftly, a clipped remark delivered before Jasmine had even finished her sentence. Miller's voice rose, sharp and impatient, as if her thoughts weren't worth the breath it took to express them. She paused, steadied herself, and pressed on. The second time, he leaned forward, cutting across her words with a dismissive wave of his hand. His tone dripped with condescension, as though he were doing the chamber a favor by sparing them her perspective. Jasmine inhaled slowly, refusing to match his arrogance with anger. The third interruption was louder. He raised his voice, drowning her out entirely. Viewers at home shifted in their seats, uneasy at the blatant disrespect. Still, she remained calm, waiting for him to tire himself out before calmly continuing. By the fourth, the audience stirred. His tone was harsher now, laced with irritation that she would not break, that she would not be silenced. She answered with poise, her steady cadence contrasting his desperation. The fifth interruption was almost theatrical, Miller gesturing broadly as though volume could compensate for substance. A murmur ran through the chamber, disapproval spreading like wildfire. Jasmine's eyes never wavered. And then came the sixth. The room tensed, the arrogance in his voice reaching its peak. It was no longer just interruption. It was an attempt to erase her completely, to strip her of the dignity to which every voice is entitled. The narrator's voice cut through the thick air. By the sixth time, the room was boiling. And then came the seventh. The cameras zoomed in, the silence between them electric. Every heartbeat in that chamber waited for what she would say next. The chamber was silent, the kind of silence that comes not from peace but from anticipation. Miller had interrupted her 6 times, each one louder, sharper, more desperate. And now, as he leaned back with that smug smile, he was certain he had won. Jasmine Crockett did not rush. She let the silence stretch, her eyes fixed on him, steady and unflinching. The pause itself became a weapon, forcing everyone in the room to lean in, to wait. Then, with calm precision, she began. Her voice was not raised, but it carried with clarity. "Mr. Miller," she said, her tone measured, "you may have interrupted me 6 times, but every interruption tells this chamber more about you than it ever will about me." She let the words sink in, her gaze locked on his. "Because when you shout over me, when you slam the table, when you try to silence my voice, what you're really trying to silence are the millions of Americans who look like me, who fight like me, who belong here just as much as you do." The room stirred. A murmur rippled through the gallery. Cameras zoomed in, capturing the intensity of her stare, the unwavering calm in her delivery. She paused again, letting the weight of her words settle before striking the final blow. "And let me remind you," she said softly but firmly, "this country does not belong to the loudest voice in the room. It belongs to those who stand for justice, even when arrogance tries to shut them down." Gasps erupted. A few in the audience broke into applause, quickly hushed but impossible to ignore. The murmurs swelled, people exchanging glances as if to confirm they had just witnessed something extraordinary. Miller's smirk faltered. His lips parted, as though searching for a comeback, but no words came. His eyes flickered downward, then back up, betraying a rare moment of vulnerability. For the first time in memory, the master of interruptions had been rendered speechless. The narrator's voice cut in, resonant and final. For the first time, Stephen Miller had no words. And in that silence, Jasmine Crockett's truth echoed louder than any of his interruptions ever could. The moment Jasmine Crockett delivered her 7th line, the ripple began. Within minutes, clips of her calm but devastating takedown flooded Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok. One caption read simply, "The 7th line heard around America." Another, trending within an hour, declared, #SitDownMiller. By evening, a new hashtag was born, #7THLine. It climbed the trending charts like wildfire, shared by thousands who saw in her words not just a clapback, but a victory for every voice ever silenced. On TikTok, edits appeared almost instantly. One user looped Miller's interruptions, 1 through 6, each punctuated by a buzzer sound, before cutting to Crockett's final line with triumphant music swelling. Millions watched, laughed, and shared. Another creator spliced her words over footage of marches, immigrant families, and service members, turning her moment into a rallying cry. Late-night comedians seized the opening. On monologues that evening, her words played to roaring laughter and applause. Stephen Miller interrupted her 6 times. One joked, which is 5 more times than he's ever been right about anything. Another ended their segment with Crockett's final line, letting it stand unedited, because no punchline could surpass the truth she had already spoken. Celebrities joined in. Musicians quoted her words in solidarity. Actors posted clips with captions like "This is leadership," and athletes reposted the viral video with fire emojis and fists raised. Politicians, too, couldn't resist amplifying it. Some praised Crockett's composure as a model of democratic dignity. Others, quietly unnerved by Miller's collapse, avoided the subject altogether. But it wasn't just the big names who gave the moment power. It was ordinary people, parents, workers, students, who filled comment sections with stories of their own. A young immigrant wrote, "She spoke for me tonight." A veteran replied, "This is why we serve. to defend voices like hers. A mother posted, "My daughter just watched this clip. She said, 'Mom, I want to be like her.'" The internet had crowned Jasmine Crockett a hero, but the meaning of the moment went deeper than virality. It wasn't just a trending hashtag or a late-night joke. It was a cultural shift, a reminder that dignity could still break through noise, that truth could still silence arrogance. And yet, as the hashtags surged and the applause echoed, the narrator's voice cut through with quiet gravity. But the real power wasn't in the trend. It was in what it meant. When the dust of that debate settled and the trending hashtags gave way to reflection, the moment revealed itself for what it truly was. Not just a clash between two individuals, but a parable about voice and silence, dignity and arrogance. Jasmine Crockett had faced a man determined to erase her presence with 6 interruptions, each one louder, harsher, more calculated to strip her of authority. But with one carefully measured line, she reframed the entire battle. The narrator's words echoed over footage of her steady gaze. Every interruption was an attempt to erase her, but her 7th line proved voices cannot be erased. It was more than a takedown. It was proof that composure could triumph over chaos, that truth spoken with conviction carried more weight than arrogance shouted at full volume. In that moment, Crockett did not just defend herself. She defended the dignity of countless others who have been cut off, talked over, or dismissed because of who they are or what they represent. The symbolism could not be missed. For every immigrant whose accent was mocked, for every woman told her words were too sharp or too soft, for every community ignored in the halls of power, Crockett's calm defiance was a declaration. You cannot silence us. Each pause she took before delivering her line, each breath she claimed in the space Miller tried to deny her, became an act of resistance. And here lay the universal truth. Arrogance will always try to impose itself by force, but courage does not need force. Courage only needs clarity. Her 7th line reminded America that even the loudest attempts at silencing crumble in the face of simple, undeniable truth. The moral crescendo rose not from theatrics, but from the resonance of justice itself. Democracy depends on the voices of the people, and every interruption, whether on a debate stage or in everyday life, is an attack not just on one person, but on the principle that everyone deserves to be heard. Crockett embodied that principle, proving that dignity is not passive, but powerful. Her victory was not measured in Miller's silence or the crowd's gasps. It was measured in the hope it sparked. Hope that ordinary people could see themselves in her composure. Hope that arrogance and bullying were not invincible forces, but fragile masks that crumble when faced with truth. Hope that one voice, refusing to yield, could carry millions along with it. The lesson lingered. Truth may stumble, voices may be interrupted, but they cannot be erased. Each attempt to silence only makes the moment of speaking more powerful. In Crockett's case, the 7th interruption became the perfect stage for her 7th line, a line that will be remembered long after the noise of the debate fades. And so the narrator closed the section with a call, not to Crockett alone, but to every listener. When your dignity is challenged, when your voice is dismissed, remember this moment. Remember that silence imposed is never final. Remember that truth, spoken with courage, will always outlast arrogance. Because in the end, history does not remember the interruptions. It remembers the line that could not be silenced. Her words did not just shut down Stephen Miller. They uplifted a nation longing to believe in the power of voice again. Stephen Miller interrupted Jasmine Crockett 6 times, convinced his volume could bury her voice. But on the 7th, his arrogance met its end. Her line didn't just shut him down. It lit up the country with a reminder that dignity, truth, and courage will always carry further than noise and entitlement. That's what this story is really about. Not a single debate or a single exchange, but a universal truth. Voices matter. Interruptions fade, but words spoken with conviction echo far beyond the room. Jasmine Crockett's 7th line proved that arrogance may try to erase, but it never succeeds. Because when dignity stands tall, it becomes unstoppable. And that's where you come in. If you believe in voices over silencing, in dignity over arrogance, then be part of this movement. Subscribe to this channel, not just to watch, but to stand with every story that lifts truth above noise. Share this video with your friends, your family, your community. Let the world see what happens when arrogance is exposed and courage shines through. Spread this moment so it doesn't fade into another headline, but grows into a reminder of what we can achieve when we refuse to be silenced. And finally, add your voice in the comments below. What did this seventh line mean to you? What voices in your life deserve to be heard? This isn't just a video. It's a space for all of us to reclaim the power of being heard together. Because in the end, this isn't just Jasmine Crockett's story. It's all of ours. And every time we choose to speak, to share, to stand, we write the next line in a movement too powerful to erase.